So Japan has had a big election, and I think it's worth looking into it and doing a video kind of breaking it down. What was the background? What happened during the actual election? What's currently happening, and what this might mean for the future? Because I actually followed this one fairly closely, and I find in the West we just don't know very much about Japanese politics. There is some reasons for that, but we'll get into that in the video. Now, before we talk about it, I just want to give a massive thank you to Aaron Uni. He covers Japanese politics in English, so he will translate party manifestos, press statements, explain kind of the cultural nuances of what certain things mean, the internal power struggles within the parties, just invaluable information that you really can't get just by kind of studying from the outside. So highly recommend you go and follow his Twitter page. He's a great guy. I believe that he's Catholic and that he's always happy to answer questions and interact with his followers. Great guy. So let's talk about the 2024 Japanese election. So we need to go back a little bit and talk about our buddy Shinzo Abe. So Shinzo Abe has dominated Japanese politics for the last decade or so. Now, he represents the right wing of the Liberal Democratic Party, staunch nationalist, social conservative, very much in line with what you would expect from that, very anti-immigration, pro-traditional marriage. And if you've seen any of the memes, very, very much in favor of natalist policies, trying to revive Japan's floundering birth rate. He also was a very strong advocate of revising Japan's constitution to permit it to have an army, among with a number of other revisions in kind of, once again, a conservative nationalist direction. So he was the longest serving prime minister in Japanese history, serving from 2012 to 2020. Now, there's debate as to why he exactly stepped down as prime minister. One school of thought is that it was a scandal and there was revolt within his party. The other one, and this is what Abe claims, is that he had health issues, colitis specifically, and he couldn't carry out the duties of being prime minister while seeking treatment for it. Your mileage may vary. Those are the two stories. Despite him stepping down, though, he continued like a proper shogun to run things from behind the scenes. The Abe faction was by far the largest and most influential through the Liberal Democratic Party, and he just had immense influence. And I mean, there's a lot of debate, once again, back and forth, but a lot of people view everything that happened after he stepped down as largely being controlled by him from behind the scenes, and he remained a member of the Japanese Diet. One could suggest that he wanted to maintain power, but just couldn't deal with all the ceremonial duties and the meetings and the foreign trips and stuff that Japan would undergo. Now, obviously, he was assassinated a couple of years back, which from my understanding has kind of caused something of a power vacuum within Japanese politics, and particularly in the Liberal Democratic Party, who's gone through 3 leaders in 4 years, the first 2 of which were not very notable and just seemed very generic and lame to me. Once again, that might have been by design to try to have a somewhat weak figure while Abe was running things from behind the scenes. So he wound up dying. And then a major political scandal broke out, the slush fund scandal. So let's talk a bit about the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. So the Liberal Democrats have been in power basically since the end of World War II, wherein in addition to the Socialist Party, you also had 2 conservative parties emerge, the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party, both of which eventually merged together to form the Liberal Democratic Party, who has held power ever since, with a brief interruption during 1993 into 1994, and more significantly, as a result of the financial crisis, they completely lost control of the government to the opposition. I don't think they actually lost control of government in 1993 to 1994. I think it was a coalition or a mesh of parties. But regardless, that was really their only period of power. So, what is the Liberal Democratic Party? It's basically a I think national conservative is probably the best way to describe it. It is a pro-American, anti-communist party. Was kind of what it was formed out of, and in a lot of ways, they resemble the kind of things that you would expect out of a national conservative party. Anti-immigration, protecting Japanese identity, supporting the traditional family, the institutions of Japan, reverence for the emperor. They pursued Japanese. The Japanese economic system is a bit different. There's a lot more cooperation between the state and private companies and stuff like that. But largely, in a very broad sense, they're similar to a lot of conservative parties you would find in the West. However, Japan didn't undergo quite the same degree of purges post World War II that like Germany did. A lot of right wing nationalism was allowed to continue on in the Liberal Democratic Party, and it has become prevalent at various points in time, most notably under Shinzo Abe. Now, because the party is so big and it governed for so long, what tended to happen is a number of different factions evolved within it. These were ranging from moderate conservative to classical liberal to right wing populist or right wing nationalist. This is what normally happens in societies that have a big conservative party or a big left wing party. Is you do get these factions. Like within the Republican Party of the United States, you have social conservatives, you have populists, you have neoconservatives, you have people who are more libertarians or classical liberals. And yeah, so these various groups developed within it. Now, we had the slush fund scandal, which I don't entirely understand, but my basic understanding is that members of the Liberal Democratic Party more or less had to join a faction to get the amount of funding that they need during elections. And various factions were embezzling money from campaign funds to the tune of, I think it was about 600 million yen, and they were being used for various illegal purposes. Most notably, Shinzo Abe's faction and another conservative faction within the party. And this more or less brought the end to the faction system, and they've attempted to reform it to get rid of it. And the party's been in a bit of disarray. Now, a characteristic of Japanese politics, from what Aaron tells me, is that prime ministers tend to resign if basically anything happens. They tend to resign at a drop of a hat, so they tend to be in power for much shorter periods of time. My understanding is that after Abe, Yoshida Suga, resigned because of the response to COVID, and then Kishida resigned as a response to the slush fund scandal. So then we had a leadership election approximately a month or so ago that I'm recording this video, in which we had three candidates. So Shigeru Ishiba has kind of been the dark stalking horse who's been going after Shinzo Abe for years. If you go back and you start to look at some of the earlier elections when Shinzo Abe was still running, he tended to be the guy who came in second place, in multiple elections, and was just trying to gain control of the party. Now, my understanding is he is a moderate within the party, somewhat liberal on issues, or at least he was on issues like same-sex marriage, and I'm not entirely sure about immigration. He was kind of all over the place on a lot of things, and when he became leader of the party, he had to move rightward because of how strong the conservative faction is within the party, and he changed his opinion on same-sex marriage. So you had him, you had Koizumi, who I think is also from the moderate or liberal side of the party, and Takaichi, or however you pronounce her name, who is the right wing of the party. She was supported by the Shinzo Abe faction, and she, like I said, represented the right wing nationalist part of the party, and she lost narrowly. So it's tradition, according to what Aaron tells me, that whenever you have a new prime minister in Japan, and this is something a lot of countries do, is they call an election. Partially because they briefly will have a surge in popularity. It's also seen as having a mandate because the party won an election with a different leader. The person wants to take a new path forward. So it's very common to switch leaders before an election, or if a leader gets forced out, to hold another one just to confirm that he still has the confidence of the people. Now, this leads us into the situation that we face now. Now, Japanese politics is a bit is kind of weird. So, let me see how I can describe it. So, generally speaking, the Liberal Democratic Party just coasts to victory. If you look back at previous elections, voter turnout tends to be pretty low compared to a lot of developed countries. If you look at it, it tends to be, oh, well, I guess there was quite a few in that one. But yeah, it tends, especially lately, to be fairly low. Now, part of that is there's a general sense of apathy, at least during the years of liberal democratic domination, because they were just going to win. It was widely accepted that they were just going to win. If you watch any anime, you'll notice whenever they talk about Japanese politics, it'll be in a very vague terms, and they'll just say the party or the government and then the opposition, and they won't be very specific about it. I asked Aaron, and he said, yeah, that's a result of the fact that, generally speaking, elections aren't competitive in Japan. People are generally apathetic, and the general thought is, well, the Liberal Democrats led us out of the destruction of World War II. Things are pretty good. They could be better. They could be a lot worse. Let's just keep voting for the status quo. East Asian countries tend to be more conformist and more collectivist than a lot of Western countries, and that often will lead to single-party domination. Kind of like what you have in Singapore with the People's Action Party. Just basically, it's a one-party state with real elections. It's just people don't really want anything else. As a slight side note, it's kind of funny in Persona 5, they have the Liberal Co-Prosperity Party, which is the governing party, which is obviously a playoff of the Liberal Democratic Party and the Pan-Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere from World War II. So the Japanese opposition is kind of a dumpster fire. One of the reasons that the LDP has held power for so long is they can't really decide like who or what they are. Are they socialist? Are they socially liberal? Are they classically liberal? Are they like an alternative conservative party? No one really knows what they are, other than just a collection of people who want to remove the LDP from power. So we go through phases. The current opposition is the Constitutional Democratic Party, which was formed from part of the Social Democratic Party and the Democratic Party of the People, which was founded in, okay, so like let's go back and look at this just to give some context. So the Constitutional Democratic Party was founded in 2020. The predecessor to it was founded in 2018. The predecessor to that was founded in 2016. The predecessor to that was founded in 1998. So it's gone through like 5 or 6 incarnations over the last decade or so. And I mean, if you look at this, you'll see like, oh, all these parties merge and split and stuff like that. So basically, no one can really get their shit together. Their brief time in power is generally regarded as being a disaster, which brought Abe to power. So it's not just them, though. You have a whole bunch of like other just random parties that break off of one and rejoin another. Like when half of the Japanese Innovation Party joined the oh no, it's still called the Japanese Innovation Party. Half of the previous Japanese Innovation Party joined the Democratic Party, whereas another part of it joined something else, and then you had like the Japanese Restoration Party, the Unity Party, and then there's like a rump of it, which has a slightly different ideology. And then you have the Democratic Party for the People, which is a split off of the Liberal Democratic Party, but then part of it merged into the Constitutional Democratic Party, and then some of it didn't. So I'm not going to go through all the minutia. It's all very complicated, but you kind of get what I mean, is that people break off, form their own party, then go back and rejoin another party. It's just kind of a mess. The other major player in Japanese politics is Kamito. Kamito is I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of it, is a Buddhist democracy party that is basically the political arm of the Buddhist movement Soku Gakkai, which is, by my understanding, a form of Pure Land Buddhism. Basically, all members of the religion vote for the party. It says social conservatism, but they aren't actually socially conservative in any meaningful sense. But they're basically always in a coalition with the Liberal Democratic Party. The Liberal Democratic Party normally would have a majority without them, but it's good to have a bigger majority. And you sometimes will have satellite parties in other countries. In Hungary, for instance, you have Fidesz, and then you have the Hungarian Christian Democrats, who are the minor party in the coalition, but they just keep them around because it gives them a couple extra seats. So they headed into the election with Shigeru Ishiba headed into the election with a majority in coalition with Kamito, going up against just all these other like random parties that were participating, with the Constitutional Democrats determined to try to take down the Liberal Democrats and change Japanese politics. So if we look at the election results, they were kind of a mess. Now, a little bit about Japan's electoral system. They have what is called mixed member proportional. So that is, you cast 2 votes. You cast 1 vote for your local representative, and you cast 1 vote for the party. So most of the votes of the seats, I believe, are single member constituencies. We call them electoral districts in America or the United States. And the rest are from a proportional list. I think you have to get more than 2% in order to get seats, but it's possible for a party to win no constituency seats like Sensito did, but pick up a couple in the proportional representation. So it's somewhere in between a more majoritarian system like what we have in Canada or Britain or the United States, and a more purely proportional representation like what you have in Spain or Israel. So it tends to produce a leading party, a couple large parties, but because of the proportional aspect and because of regionalism in Japan, you'll also get some smaller parties. So if we look at the results, the Liberal Democrats won, and they got 191 seats. Now it takes, let me just look, how many does it take? 233 seats for a majority and to elect the prime minister and to form a government. Now, the Liberal Democrats got 191 seats, so they won, but not enough to form government, even with Kamito. So they clearly, if you combine the two, won the most seats, but they also kind of got blown out. It was a really bad result. They lost their majority. And so the question is, what happens now? You have a winner of the election, technically, but the opposition parties all gained a lot of ground. So the Constitutional Democrats were left with the unenviable task of trying to form a coalition. So they only have, 148 seats, and then once again they need 233, so they are only about halfway there. Well, not, I guess 2/3 of the way there. They're nowhere close, so they need to put a coalition together with at least 2 of the opposition parties. Comito said they were not going to defect and they were going to stay in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. So that leaves a couple other parties that they can coalition with. So, firstly, they can coalition with the Japanese Innovation Party, which is a center right party, but kind of populist and kind of libertarian. There's also the Democratic Party for the People, which once again is kind of a break off from the Liberal Democratic Party, at least partially. Like I said, it's all very complicated, but they are a moderate conservative party who have similar views to the Liberal Democrats on things like immigration and national identity, but view the Liberal Democrats as being corrupt and that sort of thing. So if we look at the seat total, if the Democratic Party for the People and Comito were to coalition with the Liberal Democrats, that would give them a majority government. However, Democratic Party for the People have said they are not going to enter a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats could also partner with the Japanese Innovation Party, but the Japanese Innovation Party has also said we will not enter a coalition. So, if we were trying to form an opposition coalition, let's just do a little bit of math here. So, 148 plus 38 plus 28 brings us to 214, which is pretty much what the Liberal Democrats and Comito have. So, they're able to get up to there, but not even get a plurality of seats, because I think 4 independents rejoined, but the point is they're at about the same number. So they can't form a majority unless they go to somebody else. So who else can they go to? They can go to Reiwa, which is like a left-wing populist liberal party that wants immigration and social liberalism and stuff like that. Both of these two guys have said, no, we will not enter a coalition with Reiwa. We will also not enter a coalition with the Japanese Communist Party. If we look at the remainder, we have Sensito and Conservative Party of Japan, both of which are to the right of the Liberal Democrats, so they're not going to enter into a coalition either. So I think it's largely impossible for the opposition to form a coalition, because the moderate conservative parties, or like the center-right parties, will not enter into a coalition with that is supported by the communists or the left-wing populists. So they can't form a majority. So they could try to form a minority government, but they can't get the number of votes necessary to do that. And like I said, the Democratic Party of the People have said, no, we're not going to support them. So basically the entire thing is a giant mess. So what's most likely, okay, so once you have the election, similar to what happens in the United States, you have to elect the prime minister. The prime minister has to get a majority of the vote. You have an initial election for the prime minister wherein people can vote for whoever they want for the post of prime minister. It requires a majority to pick someone. Now, from my understanding, if there is no majority, then you go to a runoff with the top 2 candidates, and everybody has to either vote for one of them or abstain. Now, if they abstain, their vote is not counted, and you just need a majority of the people who do not abstain. And so this is the situation that we find ourselves in. What will probably happen on the first ballot is a lot of the parties will just vote for whoever their leader is. I think the Democratic Party for the People have said that they are going to vote for their leader, despite the fact he has a 0% chance of getting nominated. So it'll probably come down to Ishiba and the head of the Constitutional Democratic Party. And that's where things get interesting, because we have the runoff. So all these guys are going to have a choice. Do they either support Ishiba or do they just do nothing? Now, the Conservatives and Sensito have both said that they will support Ishiba for prime minister. They've offered a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, who I think have just ignored them. because it's not enough. It's another 6 seats, which would be nice, but I don't think they're willing to make whatever the compromises are necessary. So this kind of comes down to the Japanese Innovation Party and Democratic Party for the People and what they're going to do, because people have to vote. Probably the Social Democrats, Reiwa, and the Communists will vote for the leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party. And if these guys were going to throw their support into that, they would be able to probably reach either a majority or at least beat the Liberal Democrats to elect the next prime minister. However, the next prime minister would not have a coalition. He would not even have a plurality of the seats. So basically, they would just be voting for someone who would just be completely irrelevant. So this leads us to what will happen. Now, the most likely outcome that we've seen is that you will have what's called in a Western country, in a parliamentary countries, a supply and confidence agreement. So this will probably be between the Democratic Party for the People and the Liberal Democratic Party. Now, this is different than a coalition because they're not formally part of the government. They do not get ministers. But on votes of confidence, that is votes like budget, basically any vote that if the government loses will trigger an election, they will vote with the government or abstain and basically allow them to pass legislation. This is in exchange for the ruling party doing a whole bunch of stuff for them. I think in the Democratic Party for the People's case, it's reducing certain taxes and a couple of other things. An example we currently have is in Canada, where the Liberals and NDP have a confidence and supply agreement, wherein whenever there's a confidence motion, the NDP will vote with the Liberals so they're able to pass it, and in exchange the Liberals have introduced a whole bunch of NDP legislation. It's not quite a coalition, but it is something you see from time to time. Another case was a couple of years back in Britain. The Conservative Party won a minority government, and they reached a supply and confidence agreement with the Democratic Unionist Party, which is a conservative party in Northern Ireland. They did not formally join the coalition, but they supported the government on matters of confidence, and in return they got a whole bunch of government funding for Northern Ireland. So that looks like where we're at. It's pretty likely Ishiba will continue as prime minister. He said he's not going to resign despite this mess, and they're just going to limp along. Now, forming government is not something to sneeze at because they will still control executive positions. The ministers will still come from the Liberal Democratic Party, and they can do quite a bit without legislation. They can issue orders to their department. They can set initiatives. They can do a lot of stuff within the context of what they have. But the Liberal Democrats will be very limited in what they can do because they're relying on a moderate conservative party who's to the left of them on most issues, and anything that they do agree on, they will have to compromise on. And so this will probably limp along for who knows how long. In these scenarios, sometimes they last less than a year, sometimes they last 4 years. It really depends what the appetite is, whether the opposition thinks that bringing down the government will lead to a better result, or however you want to think about it. Now, in the long term, what does this mean? It could mean a lot of different things. The same thing could happen that happened the previous 2 times the Liberal Democrats lost power or had to go into a coalition, wherein the public forgave them and they were able to come back strong, get another majority, and then just kind of continue on as if nothing happened. Once again, even if the opposition was to form a coalition and everyone was going to agree to it, the coalition would be the Communist Party, moderate conservatives, social liberals, like radical globalists, all kinds of like people who don't agree on anything. The Constitutional Democratic Party, from my understanding, is an incoherent group of people who just want to remove the Liberal Democrats from power, and it's quite possible that they will collapse. It's also possible that Some of these other parties will collapse or split, and half of them might join the Liberal Democrats. So it's quite possible that this is just kind of a one off, that people were pissed off about the slush fund scandal, that the Liberal Democrats will limp along, people will get irritated, they'll want stability, and they'll win a big majority in 4 years. Or whenever the next election happens, that's a possibility. There's also a possibility that this is a fatal blow to the Liberal Democrats. They won't regain the level of power and basically having Japan as a one party state that they had before. We may enter a scenario where we just have continual minority governments where they have to keep being propped up by a third party. There's also the possibility, like I said, that the opposition will collapse again and some of them will join the Liberal There's all kinds of stuff that could happen. But it is the biggest shakeup of Japanese politics we've seen since the financial crisis. And it definitely will be interesting. The Abe faction, the former Abe faction, was really badly mauled during this. I think they lost about a third of their members or so. So they no longer have quite the dominant position they used to have in the party, where they had, I think, a quarter to a third of the seats were roughly associated with them, and that's gone down substantially. So will those people come back? Is the Abe faction dead? Is the party going to move leftward? Once again, we don't really know. It's entirely possible that Ishiba gets removed at some point in time, and then someone more conservative takes his place, or someone more liberal takes his place. So that's a big way of saying we don't know, but not knowing is a big difference than the status quo in Japanese politics, which is just the Liberal Democrats winning another term without really being seriously opposed by anyone. So hopefully that explained the Japanese election, what happened, who the major players were, the background, and the aftermath. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It took quite a bit of background research. Some things I'm still a little bit unsure about, but I think you have a much better probably understanding of Japanese politics now than you did going in. So God bless everybody. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you guys later.